So this is the application that I had deployed in my last session. It's an MVC application now running on the cloud. Okay, and we'll come back to our application. If you see the URL, it's a GUID with cloudapp.net. The reason this is a GUID because we are in staging. Once we move into production, we'll have the GUID, the name that we gave. Okay, and you can also assign it to your domain name if you like. Clear?
So it appears as if it is local.
It's a hosted service, so it's like you're on the net. So let's recap what we had. We had a service definition, we had a service configuration, and we had our code. We compiled all this into a package, and we deployed it into a compute instance. Clear? Now let's talk about service, roles, and instance. So a service is basically a logical, a set of roles that we define, and we'll talk about roles also. You define it a public URL. Let's say, for example, we said Windows Azure Riyadh.cloudapp.net. That will be our URL. Now, when you talk about roles, we have different instances of roles, namely two. We have worker roles and we have web roles. What is the differentiation between the two? A web role is like an IIS. It's an application, it's a service, it's a role that serves the end user. So you will deploy your services, you'll deploy your web application, anything that is going to have a public entry point, either on port 80 or port 443 as SSL, is going to be on the web role. The worker role, on the other hand, usually does not have an entry point. It does not have any ports open to communicate from outside, right? It's confined behind the firewall. And I'll talk about the mechanics of the worker role communicating with the web role. So this is where you put in your processing. Any processing that you need to do is done on the worker role. The web role is your entry point. For the time being, just keep that in mind. How many of you have worked with services in the control panel? Started services, stopped services, or built services for that matter? Anybody? Nobody? If you wanted to start a service on the control panel, what do? You go right click and say start a service or stop a service, right? So think of a worker role in that term. It's a service that is running. When the machine starts up, the service starts. When the machine stops, the service stops, right? You don't have an entry point where you go and ping into the service. It's something that's just running and doing some processing, okay? And then we have instances of the roles. So a role is a template, right? So we defined a role. We said we want a web role. We want two instances of that role. How is that role going to look like? It's going to be a small instance, right? And it's going to have certain configuration in it. I want to have PHP deployed on each instance. So that is your template. When the instance is created, it is created on the basis of the template that you give. Am I clear? No. Right? So you can have multiple instances, and that's where we can scale out. We have a template defined. At any point of time, you say, give me 20 instances. We just take that template and we start churning out new machines for you. And we can scale out very easily. They're put into a load balancer. The load balancer knows how to talk to your application. Okay? So this is the worker role, as I told you. It's a general purpose role that hosts executable code. Yes?
Again, back to this instance. Let's say we got load, okay, basic. And in future, I subscribe for the large one. So how will balance those?
Come again?
Two different instances, two different types.
You don't have two different types. This is where I said, you decide, okay, you're still thinking of a big box. Okay.
So let's say we start with a small.
That's why I said, you scale out. You take a template. Now, the way you take your template depends upon your application's capability and requirements. So, for example, my application requires 2 GB RAM. right? It requires 100 gigahertz processing power to work with. I'm sufficient with that. Now to increase my load, I don't add more processing power to that. I don't add more memory to that. That's the old way of thinking. The new way of thinking is, I'm getting more load, give me 10 more instances of the same type of machine. So you don't go and increase your processing power. It's not going to help you. You create 10 more instances of that. Yes?
What if I need more memory than more processing power?
That's why we've given you different configurations. If you look at the configurations, there are different configurations. We go up to 14 GB RAM. Okay? So the largest one we have right now is 14 GB RAM, and we're giving you 8 core machines. So for example, now if your application does not take care of multiple cores on your application, and most of the applications today don't. So if you're going to install your application on an 8 core machine, it's not going to do you any good. You put 16 cores, it's not going to do you good, because your application does not have that multi-core intelligence in place. So what good is it going to do you? Nothing. But if you have multiple instances of a single core machine running, it will scale much better. Because what happens, I have 100 million hits coming in. If I have multiple instances running, the load balancer is going to divert that to a machine which is free, is going to process it, become free, give it to another one. So one machine cannot handle the load. If you have multiple machines, they can handle the load much better. And that's why we have this load balancing mechanism in place.
So is it like normal load balancing what we have in the system?
It's a load, it's like a normal load balancing. Okay?
Excuse me, but in that case, I will waste the other resources.
Like?
For example, I don't want more CPU, for example. I want just memory. Why I take another instance of CPU and memory? I just want one memory.
That's why you have different configurations. That's why you have some with more memory, some with less memory, some with more processing power.
Different configuration of the same instance.
You have different configuration types of instances. We have 6, 7 different types of configurations, starting from a very small instance to an extra large instance. Okay? And if you want to discuss more in details, we can take it offline. But just understand the concepts right now. Okay? So we have a worker role which is basically going to do execution of applications. On the other hand, you have a website which is running IIS. So a worker role usually does not have IIS. And I say usually because in most cases you will not run IIS on a worker role. It cannot scale well. Right? The website will have, or the web role is going to have IIS running. Right? It's going to have an HTTP port open, either AT or 443 for SSL. And then you have something called a role entry point. Now the role entry point can start up applications. So for example, on a worker role, on a web role, you want to have certain applications started, right? You want to combine your worker role and the web role in one instance. You can do that. But keep in mind, it does not scale well, right? Your applications don't scale well in that sense. So let's see here. This is what we've been talking about. You have the internet traffic coming in, it goes to a load balancer. Right? When you have multiple web roles, the load balancer is going to take care of it and distribute the traffic accordingly. You can also have IIS running on the worker role and open it to the web, but then does not scale very well. And in between we have the different services, the storage, the queues, and the blobs. We'll talk about that in the next session. So let's talk about a worker role. Okay, what the worker role does. So if I come back to my, let's go from here itself. So I have this application called Fluffy Photos. Before that, let's see if our application has been deployed. So application has been deployed now, and if you see here, it has 2 instances running, right? It doesn't have one, it has 2 instances. So you can have multiple instances running on a role. So this template that I defined, I said this application template I am creating as a web role, right? I said give me 2 instances. At any point of time, I can go and change that to 3 instances, 4 instances, 5 instances, 10 instances. I can say that I have a payroll application, and during the end of the month, 1 week, I am going to have a huge surge in processing. So give me 2 instances now. During the last week of the month, make it 5 instances or 6 instances to cater for the extra load. And then at the end of the month, drop it back to 2. So you can programmatically control that also. Okay?
It's not automatically?
No, it's not done automatically. Let's say there was a virus attack on your web server. There was a denial of service. And if we had to automatically open this up, it would just spin, and then you would have a huge bill at the end of the month. So we give you control. You decide. You monitor it, and you decide how you want to scale out.
But I can schedule it, like in the end of the year or
You can schedule it. You can write an application to schedule it. But we don't do it for you. We let you control that. Yes?
It has the control, the monitoring tools that I need. Is it all there?
The monitoring, the diagnostics are all there. Like if I showed you here on the emulator, in the emulator here, when we had deployed the application, right, it was doing diagnostics. So we have something called an app fabric, which monitors your application. At any point of time, if your application stops responding, or something goes wrong on the physical machine, we are going to bring down that instance and create a new instance for you. Okay, so we do the monitoring for you. So we know if there's huge traffic, you can go and have a look, and then you can schedule it accordingly. Yes?
Hello. Go back, you talked about you are paying for what you are using.
Yes.
Right, this is the cloud. But if I'm configuring it manually, then it is not paying for what I am using.
Why not?
Because I will pay for what I'm hosting, not using. If I say, okay, I want to host 3 instances, then I have to pay for 3 instances.
Yes.
Also if my peak time is using 1 instance,
Yes.
right, then I will pay for 3 instances.
At the time you use it. So it's pay for what you use. So if you're using 20 instances for just 2 days.
Okay, but now as you told you before minutes, if I don't know the peak time, let's say now we are at the beginning of the new year.
Right.
So I don't know when will be the peak time. I will host, let's say, 10 instances for.
No, you will not do that.
Okay.
You decide.
When will be the peak time? Okay. At once, I will have millions of hits. Okay, and it will be for 2 hours. If I fail to give service at this time to my customers, I will fail in the market. Okay. So we are again in the same problem, but having a huge infrastructure.
No, you don't. That's why you have the monitoring services, and if you feel that your applications are increasing, you increase your 20 instances for 2 hours. It's pay for what you use. So if you're using it for 2 hours, you're going to pay for 2 hours.
What you use at the time?
Yes.
Yeah, but you have to monitor manually. You have to still monitor, okay, I have problem now. I have to.
No, you don't have to monitor manually. You can have, you can configure your application and put a threshold that if I am increasing in my load, okay, you go up to 10 instances, but don't go beyond 10 instances.
Then I can specify the maximum. Let's say I can.
Yes, you say it's maximum so much I need. You can scale out in the application itself. So the
Scale out automatically.
automatically.
No, in configuration you have to define instance, right?
Yeah, but you can program it. That's what I said. The configuration file can be changed programmatically. Okay, it can be changed from the portal also. So the configuration file is a place where you hold your configuration settings, and it's something that can be changed. The definition does not get changed. The definitions is your role instance, the type, the web role, small, big, large. That's the definition, right? How many entry points you have in that thing. That's the definition, because it needs to know how many ports to open, what ports to open. That's the definition. The configuration is your connection strings, the number of instances that can be changed at runtime.
No, that we can define dynamically the instance.
You can define dynamically. That's what I'm saying. That's the whole point of it. You're not stuck to you don't have to redeploy your application to create more instances. It's all done dynamically. You have the APIs there. So you can monitor your application and you say if it's going to start getting load, scale out and put a maximum. Say don't go beyond 10. We give you the control over your application. We don't enforce anything.
So here it will show all the instances.
It will show how many instances are being run. So you have all the monitoring APIs that you can use there. Okay? So if let's go ahead, we can take the questions in lunch because then otherwise we'll not be able to cover what we want. So if I come here now, let's close this. So if I click on this, this is the one I just deployed now, okay? And it says, welcome to Azure Workshop Real, right? So this is the application we took now, deployed to the web, and we said, give me 2 instances. At any point of time, 1 instance goes down, it's going to recreate an instance for me, okay? So let's go back to that fluffy photos that we talked about. So this is an application, this is again hosted on the cloud, right? It's an Azure application. The source code is available to you on Codeplex. So you can go and have a look at it. What this does is, if I sign in, I can go to my albums, I can upload a picture, say browse pictures, sample pictures. So let's say we take the desert. And give it a title and you submit. Now what this does is it starts taking the picture into the web role, right? That's your entry point. So the fluffy photos is hosted on a web role. The worker role is going to take this photo, right? And it's going to start processing this photo. It's going to create thumbnail for you so that you can be shown in your album. And it's going to put it back onto the Windows Azure storage. So that's the process of the worker role. So if I come here into Visual Studio, let me start a new instance, or we can do it from here. I put it somewhere, I don't remember. And it will come back to I have the source code somewhere here, I can show you. Okay, so we'll come back to this later on. Yeah, in about 5 minutes. Just 5 more minutes, we'll finish and we'll. Okay. So probably after the break, I will pick up the thing and I will show you. Okay. So this is the job of the worker role. Do some kind of a processing, right? So here again, if you see here, we have the different instances we talked about, right? We have extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. So you have different configurations that you have. Okay? And if you look at the price is not very much different, right? If you're talking about a very small, yes.
The price per day?
No, this is not per day. I think it's per hour kind of a pricing. Okay. Like for example, an extra small instance will cost you about $30 or so a month, full month. Okay. Now let's talk about the surface definition and configuration. We provide you different, yeah.
For more from here, if I have more instances of the same configuration, that will cost me more money.
Definitely. So we were talking about the service definition and configuration. What you can also define, if I come back here to the portal, if I come back to the management portal, I have an option which says configure OS. Okay? And I can decide what operating system do I want. Do I want the Windows Server 2008 SP2 or do I want the R2? Right? I can also say OS versioning. So this is the version of the Windows Azure release. I can say keep it at a particular release or automatically upgrade it whenever a new release is available. So we give you the control, we don't enforce things on you. Right? But if you leave it at automatic, then we will patch your applications. So for example, you have 2 machines running. What we will do is, we'll create a new machine based on the new OS, deploy your applications, bring down the old one. Deploy a new instance, bring down the second one. So you have 2 new applications already patched, running, without you having to take any intervention. Clear? So that's where platform as a service comes in. And we saw some of these configurations. I'll show you this also when we talk about the, when I show you the Fluffy Photos application. You can configure some of these settings in the configuration, service configuration. So these are things that can change. Now if you see here, there's something called a startup task. Now, let's keep this till the time I talk about the PHP application. I'll explain to you how this is used. Okay? So, okay, let's go back here once. If I want to deploy a PHP application on Windows Azure, we don't have PHP on Windows Azure. You have 2 ways of installing PHP on Azure. One is something called the Web Platform Installer. So what you could do is, you can write a script which is packaged with your application, and that is run on startup, right? So when your virtual machine starts up, the platform installer is going to go download PHP, configure it for you, and then run your application, right? The second way is that you download PHP, configure it on your machine, package it with your application, and deploy it to Windows Azure. Both work. Okay, so it's up to you how you want to do it. So the startup tasks which you're talking about helps you do that. So in our case, we have this install PHP command, right? This is going to be executed on the Windows Azure. It's going to run the web platform installer. The web platform installer is going to install PHP for me, or any other thing for that matter, configure it and run Windows the application that I have configured, right? How many of you have used the platform installer? Nobody? Let me show you. So if I come back here, so it's called the Web PI. It's a small download that you get from microsoft.com/web. right? And this allows you to download a lot of applications and configure your application. So for example, people ask, what is the best way to configure my IIS? There's an IIS configuration in here that you can use. So IIS recommended configuration, right? It installs it and configures for you. You don't have to mess around with it. You have Visual Studio SP1, you have Orchard CMS, you have Windows Azure SDK for Node.js. So you have all of these available for you. So for example, if I come in here and say PHP, so I can go and install PHP on my machine, right? Download it, it'll configure it. I can install Joomla, I can download WordPress, and then deploy my application. So it's completely configurable. So let me show you an application that I have already deployed to my Azure instance. If I come here, so if you see here, this is a PHP application that I wrote. I'm not too much of a PHP developer, but this is basically PHP info, which gives you the basic information of your PHP running on the cloud. Okay? We talked about the deployment. You have different mechanics to deploy your application. You can do it from Visual Studio, as I showed you. You can package it and then deploy it from the portal. You have REST APIs, and you can even have PowerShell commandlets. So if you are an administrator, you're very much comfortable with PowerShell, you can use PowerShell commandlets to deploy your application to Windows Azure using PowerShell. Okay? Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, we have 6 data centers across the world. You have 2 in North America, 2 in Europe, and 2 in the Asia Pacific region. What this does is it allows you to create a disaster recovery scenario very easily, right? And when we talk about traffic manager and things like that, we show you how you can scale your application across the different regions. So you choose your application based on the proximity that you have, and you deploy your applications there. Now, if you want to upgrade your application from a staging to production, what do you do? Right? So I took my application, I deployed it into staging. Now I want to migrate that application into production. How do I do that? So what you could do is, I come back to my management portal. I have something called here swap WIP. So this is your virtual IP address. And if I come here and I say swap WIP, if I had a production environment, it would take the staging and make it into production, and take the production and make it into staging. So what that gives you is immediate deployment to production. So in most organizations, you take applications and you deploy to staging. And then from staging, you deploy them to production. You don't deploy to production directly, right? So with the WIP swap, you get staging as production. Production becomes a backup of your production environment. So at any point of time, you feel that you have a problem in your production, you can always revert back. Clear?
It's called certification stage.
Certification stage or testing stage or QA, whatever you may call it, right? So once you are happy with your staging environment, you want to move to production, you just do a WIP swap and your production becomes staging and staging becomes production. So we have some more building blocks: caching, access control, service bus. We are going to talk about in these details, so I'm not going to go into this. We have got data services like reporting, data sync. We'll get into details of these also. Okay, so Let's take a quick break, 10 minutes, come back, and then inshallah we'll continue with the rest of the session. Okay? Hello? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about Windows Azure storage. Now, keep in mind what we talked about a while earlier. We have the worker role and we have the web role. And these are created from templates that we have defined. So, in a normal hosting environment, we would usually put our data on the same box. Right? But now we are talking about scaling out. So if I'm going to have the data on the same box, then I cannot scale out. Right? If I have to create new instances, then I don't have the data on every machine. So what I do is I take that data and store it outside. I don't have any data stored on my physical machine unless and until I'm caching it. So all my data is going to reside somewhere outside on a globally available storage, and that's where the storage in the cloud comes in. We provide that to you as a service, right? It's highly scalable. You can go up to 100 terabytes per account. Whenever you ask for a storage account, we create 3 instances of that account for you. Fine? So if one instance has to crash, we can recover from the second 2 instances. Not only that, we duplicate those 3 instances in another data center. So at all times your data is secure. So you're getting 6 instances for the price of 1. Get me? So whenever you're creating a data, so for example, you say give me 10 gigabytes of storage space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create that on 3 different partitions or 3 different instances in my data center. And I'm going to go to another data center and create 3 more for you. So for example, if that data center has to get disrupted, connectivity breaks, something, God forbid, happens, then I can go to another data center and reroute your data from there, right? So that's how you can scale out. It's highly durable and it's highly available. You only pay for what you use, okay? Now, this is exposed through REST API. So it's available through any HTTP client that you can use. It's available from the phone, from any of the devices. It's available from the web. So it's a highly scalable and available model. So how do you Okay, so how do you create this storage account? Like we created a hosted service, we go and create a storage account. And we choose a data center where we want our storage to reside, right? Then we create the storage that we want, 10 gigabytes, 20 gigabytes, whatever is our requirements. What we also have is something called a CDN. Now what the CDN does is it allows you to distribute data. So let's say my storage is in North America. I have a customer who's coming from the Far East. The latency for that application to go and fetch the data from the North American data server is going to be high. So we have 24 nodes across the world on which we cache your data and distribute the data from there. Okay? So it's called a content delivery network. We'll talk about more in detail. As I told you, we co-locate your storage account with the, you can co-locate your storage account with the compute account. So you can say, okay, take my data and locate it somewhere close to my compute instance in the same data center. So the latency between your application and data is not that big. Okay, so you can do that also. And what we give you is 2 independent 512-bit keys to access your data. So it's highly secure. So whenever you need to access anything on the storage network, you need to provide these keys, or you need to provide shared access keys, which we'll talk about in a moment. As I told you, we give you geo-replication also. So we replicate your instance on a different data center. We've got storage analytics. So you got all the logs, how much you have used, how your data is being used, things like that. You have all the metrics provided to you. And then you have also improved HTTP headers for blobs. And we'll talk about that when we talk about metadata in a while. So once you start application development, you need a local instance to test your application, right? And as I showed you, we give you the storage emulator on your machine. So this emulates the instance that is running in the cloud. It uses a SQL Server 2005 or 2008 database to offline its storage. So basically the storage is in a SQL Server database locally, not on the cloud. So for us to emulate the storage, we do it on a SQL Server database. Now, as I said, this is a mock storage, so there are slight differences. Okay, the link here, I will send these PowerPoint presentations to you. You can have a look at that. So these are slight variations in the way the local storage works and the cloud works, but not significant. So we look at the how we can take the application, and we can take the storage and you can call it from the client using a REST API. You also have the API from SDKs. So for example, we have the as I mentioned to you earlier, we have the Windows Phone SDK that you have for Windows Azure. You have one for iOS, you have for Android, and one for Windows 8 slates. So you can use native APIs to access the storage account. You don't necessarily have to go and rewrite the REST APIs yourself. Now the storage APIs are available in most of the platforms. They are in C#, Python, most of these. But keep in mind that you'll have to download the SDKs and use them. Okay. Security, as I told you, we have 2 digitally signed signatures that you can use to access the storage account, and these can be regenerated independently. The reason we give you 2 is that you can do a key rotation. So for example, if you have 1 key, you can use it for 90 days. So while you're regenerating the key, you can use the second key and use that in production. So you always have 2 keys to work with. Okay. Now, if you don't want to give, and you should not give your keys to everybody.
What about the Microsoft company? Can know what's the data? Sir? Or it is what's called encrypted?
I don't think it is encrypted unless you encrypt it. But people, you have security policies in place. People just cannot go and look at your data. Okay?
You mean my application, it should be normal software, not critical software?
No, it can be a critical software. And we take care of the security for you. So, the security has been put in place so that your data is not compromised.
Well, I cannot take full control of my secure data.
If you're hosting your application on a hoster, can you take full control of the application?
Yes, if it is in my computer room.
Fine. But even if it's in your computer room, right, you have, and it's always connected to the net. In many cases, I'll tell you, the breach does not happen in a hosted entity. Maximum of times the breach happens from the local office. So it's somebody inside who has access to the data who breaches the data. The data usually does not get leaked from a hoster. You look at the statistics.
Okay, can I put firewall against Microsoft, for example? Firewall inside my storage.
You already have a firewall in place. People cannot access your data from outside. I will show you. The data is not available unless you give them permission to use it. You can put security such that this data is only available for an hour. Okay, you can put policies in place. You can define who uses your data and who does not use your data. So it's a highly secure environment. We have a lot of our own confidential data on the storage. We have an internal application called the blob storage, in which our team shares data. So a lot of confidential information is sitting there. So all our video recordings, our discussions that happen are sitting in there. Okay, so it's a highly secure environment. So in terms of Windows Azure storage, you have the following capabilities. You have blobs, you have drives, you have tables, and you have queues. Now, blobs are, as the name says, any binary data that you want to dump onto the storage. So this can be your XML files, they can be your video files, they can be your picture files, music files, any content, executables that you want to store somewhere, right? These can be taken and put onto the blob storage. The drive is an interface partition that you can mount onto your computer emulator, right? So for certain reason, if you have a dependency on a fixed drive and you want to have that notion of a fixed drive on your compute instance, then you can load a drive partition and give it a physical drive, fine? Because in the Azure world, you don't have a drive per se. There's no notion of a drive. You ask for a storage, you get storage. You don't say I want a C drive or I want a D drive or an E drive. That notion does not exist. Okay? And somebody asked me, can I take my application and deploy it to the web? And I said, there are certain things you will have to take care, and this is one of them. Your images doesn't come from a fixed file location. It comes from the storage, right? So those mappings you'll have to take care. Other than that, it's an application that you host on Azure. But these small differences you'll have to take into consideration. Now, tables are a good way to store your data. It's a structured table, so it has columns, it has rows, but it is not relational. So you don't have a concept of having a parent and child relationship. You don't have products and product details and enforcement of integrity, right? You just dump data there, it is indexed, you can retrieve it fast, but you cannot enforce constraints. Then you have something called queues. And this is where most of your processing, most of your messaging takes place. This is how a worker role communicates with a web role. And this is how we are able to scale out so well on the Azure environment. And we'll talk about that. So let me show you a few examples, and then we can continue. So as I mentioned, I have an application here. Hope it works. It's called the blob share. So blob share is an internal share that we use for our team, and it allows us to store data and retrieve data very easily from here. Okay, we also have an application written by somebody. It is called my Azure storage. And this allows you to work with the storage account. So if I come here into our portal, and I mentioned to you, you have the hosted services and you have storage accounts. So I have a storage account called WP Demo, and as I mentioned to you, you have two keys that you can work with, the primary access key and the secondary access key. So I can take any one of those keys, copy it, and hopefully it works here. Okay, and I give it the name of my storage account, say login. So I can work with tables, queues, and I can work with blobs. So if you see here, I have three folders, one called the private folder and one called the public folder. Now the public folder, I have shared access to everybody. Okay, so if I come in here, here, take this URL, copy it, go to my browser, dump it here, I have access to the picture, right? Because this is something that I have publicly shared. Now, the way you do that is if you come back to the, here, on the folder, I can go to share, I can define the public access level of this container, right? So in here I am saying give me public access at the blob level. That means if I know the physical file name, I know the path of the file, then I can access the file. If I don't know it, I will not be able to go and do a directory search on the container and say show me all the files. I cannot do that. If I want to do that, then I say give public access at the container level, right? So you can create any kind of folders that you like in here, and for example you may want to have a folder for public images, you want to have a folder for your videos, whatever, private data, files that you're storing as XML. You decide how you want to organize your structure. Now if I come to the private section, let's say edit, I have turned public access off. That means even if I know the URL of that blob, I cannot access it. It says the resource is not found. So what if I want to give access to this resource from my application? There are two ways. One, pardon me? Yeah, the way you give permission is either he needs to have the security key that you use to log into the storage account, that 512 key, or you give your application a shared access key. Okay? So what you would do is, for example, if you are accessing your data from a phone, you don't want to put the shared access, the security key on your phone. So what you do is you have the key in your web role. Your client is going to connect to the web role. From the web role, it's going to request a shared access key from the storage account, pass that shared access key to the phone, and then the phone will access the resource using the shared access key. And you can define the time you want that shared access key to be live. So if I come back here, I can say share, and I want to define a timeline for this. How long is this going to be available? So I can come back here and say today, done. today is the 20th. So it would be probably so from 8:30 a.m., right, all the way to 9:57. You cannot give more than an hour. It will be within an hour's time. I'm saying give me read access, and then I say get URL. I can copy the link, come here, paste it. Okay, so here we need to make this also 8:30.
Expired.
So it's 8:30 to 9:30.
That time was already bought.
Pardon me? No, this is the time on the server, not your local time. So you're asking from the server, give me a shared access security. So whichever server, wherever in the world it is, okay, is going to give you an hour's lease. So anytime between 8:30 to 9:30, this should work.
You can keep the default values without providing a start date. You can cancel out of this and try it again. And
Sometimes it doesn't work. That's why I tried this. Let me close this.
yeah, try it.
If you can
And
see,
now leave it as is, because if it is going to give us 1 hour, then it knows what's the time on the server.
Okay. Sometimes this doesn't work, so you have to specify the start and end time. So now what I have done is I have given an hour's lease. Okay?
Probably the idea is that we were confusing the server time.
No, it is server time.
Yeah, I know, we were confusing it by providing a start time. So it tries to calculate 1 hour lease after that one start date that we provided. So that was causing the trouble.
For example, if I come here, so this is my image which I am requesting. This is now the expiry sheet time. You could have a start time and an end time. So this is the end time. And the resource we are requesting for is a blob, right? So we want a particular image. The permission on this is read, and this is my signature. So this is my shared access signature, right? Which is giving me a lease of 1 hour. So at this time, right, my lease is going to expire and nobody can access my image anymore. So this is one way of doing it. If you want more granular control, then what you do is, close this, come to the container and say manage policies, and you create a policy. So here I am creating a policy called demo. I am saying this is going to start on the 28th, done, and it's going to end on, let's say, the 31st, done. I want read access, click OK. So now when I'm going to access the resource, I'm going to say share, and I'm not going to use the shared access key for an hour. I'm going to select the policy and say get URL. Copy it, close. And it works. Fine. I could do that for the next picture also. And if you see here, I have no share that I have defined. Okay. So I can say share, and I'm going to take the policy, get URL, copy, come back here and say, so there I go. Okay. So this is how you manage security. You can give very fine-grained controls to whoever you like. You can define multiple policies. You can do it on a shared access key. Various mechanics of having secured your data, right? You decide you want to give write permissions, read permissions, or list permissions. There's one more tool that you could use, which I find very helpful, and that's called the Cloud Explorer. And you can find this on the Codeplex. So the way you work with it is you define your account, you set up your account, you provide it your key, right? And then it's like a file explorer. It gives you your storage. Yes.
Suppose I have a bank and I put my data into the Microsoft storage.
Yes.
Microsoft will assume the account will not be corrupted. For example, if it is corrupted, it will give the people the lost money, for example?
There is a service level agreement in place. I don't know the semantics of it. You will have.
Important question.
See, nobody. If you look at the hosting environment, right?
I mean, if I am responsible of your, for example, child, if your child, for example, die, I will pay you.
I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
right? But
This is, I think, it is good for the normal application. For example, pulling information for the student, for the patient.
no, you have a lot of applications already. Like for example, let me give you an example. Where are all your credit cards hosted?
Yeah, normal security thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're all on the net.
Yeah, but Visa assure your retail.
Yeah, Visa. What about Amazon? What about eBay?
It is marketing.
It's not marketing. It is your credit card information. What happened with Sony? What happened with Sony? All your accounts, even from Visa, the accounts were stolen from on-premise. So there is no guarantee of this. Amazon is not going to say that if your credit card is stolen, I'm going to return back your money.
It happened for me. It happened once a day, maybe 200 riyal done from by steal.
Yes.
When I was in the US, when I returned to my country, I said no, I didn't sign this one. He returned back to me.
Yeah, I understand. That is the visa's processing capabilities, right?
Should Microsoft be responsible about this one?
I don't know about the I don't know about this. See, this is legalities. I don't want to get into legalities here. Okay, here we are talking about technology, right? If you want to look at the legalities, then you can look at the legalities. You can look at the service level agreement, and we can say what is offered to you. And that's a whole different discussion.
It is nice technology.
Yeah. So what we are talking about here is and for your kind of information, not every application is going to go to the cloud. Okay. You may have very critical, time-sensitive applications. You will not take that to the cloud. Why? Because for that you need to have a very fine-tuned environment. Maybe in a few years' time, yes, but the technology as of today is not ready for that. So we are not saying that everything is going to take everything and start moving to the cloud. No, it's going to be a gradual process over the years.